For those of you who may remember, like, the very, very early days of, like, YouTube, and in particular, if you were around in, like, the very early YouTube Atheum days, although the guy we're talking about is still around, he's called Amun Ra. And I always remember him talking about how even though he was like an atheist in Texas, he was constantly fighting against making sure that they had good education. And that one of the big things that people didn't understand about Texas in particular, because it was a very big purchaser of school books. I think it still is, and I think it still applies very much to all states. That pretty much if Texas does this to their school books, then pretty much all those school books then get purchased for pretty much every other state. So you can see him go to like his local school meetings, speaking out, all this activism he used to sort of really get involved in to basically say to these guys, look, they are trying to teach, creationism in science. It doesn't belong there. Why are you doing this? It will be bad for our, education. And I always remember one of the things he said, because it must have been on the Atheist Experience, because I have a feeling Matt Dillahunty must have been there as well, because I seem to remember him on that video, and I've tried to look for it, but I can't for the life of me find it. But I'm sure it exists, because I'm sure it was him that said it. They were talking about Department of Education, and you remember this was like, you are talking like 2000 and you're talking like 2007, maybe 2008 when this conversation took place. So this is very old. So my even back then, my memory of this is sort of fuzzy. So I'm gonna maybe completely misremember all this. But from what I again recall of that conversation particularly happening, there was someone calling in and they were asking like, oh well, why do you focus so much on, education? Why do you go to these, town hall meetings? I don't see why you should fight that. And his response was, well, look, if we do not fight these battles now, you will find that eventually this doctrination that he is saying will spread, and it will spread rapidly. And he said, if you listen to a lot of what those people were saying at that time, they want to get rid of the Department of Education. It is their long-held belief to get rid of the Department of Education, because if they do that, then it opens up the door massively to sneak in all kinds of religious education into the American school system. And just yesterday, even though we knew, or at least suspected, maybe this was coming down the pipe, Trump basically got rid of the Department of Education. The Department of Education no longer exists. That means officially at this moment in time, the American education system is basically now a patchwork of currently very similar education standards and rules and guidelines. However, that will rapidly deteriorate. And I guarantee you, within the next week, next 2 weeks, we will be hearing stories, particularly most likely in red states, where they move and they start to put in things like creationism, religious education. They start to massively discriminate against people of color, girls, LGBT youths. The Department of Education provided so many protections. And we have to remember, over here, this movement also exists as well. Because as I keep on trying to remind you all, like, there's this whole trail of dark money that flows from those types of organizations right here into the UK, right here into Europe, right into Ireland as well. For example, there's been a lot of dark money flowing into Ireland trying to fund like anti-abortion activists and anti-abortion movements. We've seen this happen over here in the UK as well. And I guarantee you now that they've succeeded in getting rid of the Department of Education. We could see very similar attempts to do this as well. Always remember that you have people from, Nigel Farage in Reform to even people in the Conservative movement looking over and thinking that the Trump blueprint of what's going on right there in the White House is like a good thing to emulate. Bringing in something like Doge, which we are rapidly seeing. I mean, there's just so many stories about Doge that are out there right now of the destruction, the chaos, and stuff that we've seen. And I guarantee you, there's the stories and then there is the stuff we have not yet heard. Or there is the stuff and the chaos that is about to happen that will be directly linked to some of the stuff that the boys Doge and Elon Musk have done. That will be deadly. And that also includes people over here in the UK that want to get rid of the Department of Education. Now, their whole idea is that we need to set up like local schools, and you give it to like a local school, and then it's down to like the governors, the parents organization. They're the really ones who should decide what goes on at school, not like the Department of Education, which might say, hey, here's this set education standards we want you to follow. But most importantly, it is especially in America, it is the civil rights protections that the Department of Education for years has fought against. And I think you will now see that Department of Education being gone, you're going to see now incredibly worse education outcomes. Incredibly worse education outcomes. Because it defended time after time and time again protections for African American students, for their right to a good education, LGBT youths, I think it's Title 9 for girls in schools. So many things that the Department of Education was sort of created for. I mean, the Department of Education was created in many ways to assure that education was fair, and that every kid was meant to be given a decent chance. And Republicans and these even crazy Republicans have done everything they possibly can to do that. And it all goes back to what I said at the beginning with a guy called Amun Ra. And if you remember him and you remember any of his videos and things like that, he called it so long ago. He called it so long ago about that stuff. And now I think you're going to see unleashed across America, and if anything, declining education standards or radically different education standards. Because now, if you're in America, you need to care very, very much what's going on your local school board. You need to care more so than ever before. And here's the thing: most Democrats, most other people that might be, have woken up or gone to bed, like say with this news, the Department of Education, they don't care. That this, well, I think they do care, but they never got involved. They didn't realize how important, like, local, meetings and school board meetings were, and who is and who isn't on those school boards. But the Republicans did. These crazy MAGA Republicans did. Like I say, go back to some of Amun Ra's old videos where he's talking at like these school meetings about how important like science education is, how important it is to maintain a good educational standard. I guarantee you, within weeks, we are going to be hearing about some of the insane, crazy stuff that they are going to sort of put forward for some kids in some states now to be taught. Or the fact that you could very, very well see that, well, shall we say, certain students aren't going to be allowed to go to certain schools in some states. Like, say, Department of Education was created in a lot to improve, integration into schools. And it was there to make sure that everyone played on a level playing field. That's now gone as well. And remember, there are people in the conservative movement over here in the UK that want that very same thing as well. That is why, even though, again, I do not want to become like a UK channel that constantly covers some of the stuff that Trump does, but whenever he does stuff like that, do not forget that it has somewhat of an influence to our conservative politicians over there, because they are looking over there and going, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Ooh, be very aware. Be very aware of that. And every time you see this, every time you see a politician talk about, or a UK politician talk about how good it would be to bring in Doge, you have a litany of stories you can just bring up and say, "Oh well, Doge did this, 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 and this." Soon we'll have a litany of examples as well of this is why you don't get rid of Department of Education. It's like, I still can't believe many of our politicians here in the UK talk about how wonderful Harvey Millet is. He's an absolute lunatic, who gets economic advice from his dead dog. And currently, potentially might be even being impeached because he was involved in a massive crypto scam. But there's a lot of conservative politicians over here in the UK that have gone, gee, that's someone who we should emulate. Anyway, as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. I'll tell you this now. If I was a parent in America, I would be very worried. I would be very worried. And if I could, and I think if you have the means to do so, move to Canada. Move to Canada, move to the UK, move to Ireland, move to New Zealand or Australia. If you are, if you do know a second language, you have even more options. But, if you have the capabilities to do so, leave. If you don't, then you need to start organizing. You need to go and you need to find other parents who are like you, outraged that this has happened and worried just as much as you are. Because if you don't organize, your child's education is gonna suffer. And the thing is, you guys are already on the back foot. You guys are so much on the back foot over this. But if you don't organize now, your child's education is going to suffer. Very, very much so. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.